Hi, welcome back to Soul Sisters podcast. We're so glad that you're here. The music you just heard phase into my voice was composed by Emily's Reiki practitioner, Brandon Novogradic. Thank you so much. We're so excited. I think this is just going to add more to what we already have to offer.
Thank you, Brandon. We're so grateful to you. Just so everyone, Brandon is one of the most amazing people that I have ever come to know. He does a lot for me and he does a lot for the community. On top of being a musician, he's also a cancer and wellness coach, as well as an intuitive reader and Reiki practitioner at Visions in Reiki Soul Spa in Starbane, Pennsylvania, which is right out of the Pittsburgh area. I frequent there. Any event that they have going on, I'm always there. And it's just such a wonderful community to be a part of. I'm so grateful to have Brandon in my life. So thank you for that fantastic intro, Brandon. We really, really appreciate your skills and your knowledge, and we love you very much.
Yeah. This week, we're going to talk about mindfulness. I know that we touched upon it a little bit last time, but we want to leave nature out of it a bit in case some of you live in the depths of Pittsburgh and you really are in a little bit of a concrete jungle. Or maybe you just, you want to learn some new skills that aren't nature-based. So we're going to talk about what is mindfulness, where did it stem from, and how can we apply it when life is feeling a little rough? How can we apply it when, there's just time for it in our day? How can we schedule it into our day? So that's kind of where we're headed with this, and we're excited that you're here again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to talk about where mindfulness comes from, because I feel like a lot of it is so second nature to us, almost like we take it for granted. We don't realize that we're doing it, but there's probably things that we do in our everyday life, not probably, but definitely, that we don't even relate back to these ancient practices. So mindfulness is a mental practice that's rooted in Buddhist traditions. It's widely adopted in multiple different contexts. So it involves paying deliberate attention to present moments without judgment. And Alyssa is really, really good at digging into that without judgment. So tuned. So what this means is really observing your thoughts, your feelings, your bodily sensations, surrounding environments without getting caught up in them or actually reacting to them. And something that I'd like to add in here is I think that it's easy to listen to this podcast and look at certifications that I have or that Alyssa has and think wow, they're really whole people and they just have, all of these techniques that they do and they're just zen every day. That is not the case. We all go through things in life, and these are practices that we're familiar with and that we're bringing to you because we find them helpful for ourselves. But we know that they're helpful for ourselves because we are also going through things. And Alyssa had mentioned, what it means to apply mindfulness when life gets real, right? When it's a little tough or overwhelming. And that doesn't just apply to the outside world. It applies to these voices right here on this podcast. So just know that you're not alone.
Yeah, that is a deep cut. That's so true. And then also, like Emily said, again, mindfulness is being present in the moment without judgment. And sometimes just noticing your judgments can still be mindfulness, and giving yourself a little bit of love when you notice that judgment. So there may still be judgments within that mindfulness, but it's just noticing that and being oh yeah, I judged that. Okay, can I let this pass? Or should I, set aside time to maybe think more about this later and not just spiral into this thing I'm judging or this thing that's upsetting me. Because, upset can be a judgment. Something being really cute, that's a judgment. So a judgment isn't oh, woe is me, this is all just bad. Judgment is really just anything with emotion attached to it. So kind of break it down a little bit more. But yeah.
Judgment doesn't have to be oh, I don't like her hair today, right? That's what we think about when we think of judgment. We think very high school. Judgment, like Alyssa said, is anything with emotion attached to it. So it could be this brings me joy, but why? You know what I mean? There's a judgment connected to everything that we do based in emotion. And so judgment isn't just the pettiness factor that we think we're applying. It has a lot to do with all the different emotions that are going through your head.
So much. And then it means observing your thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and the environment without reacting or responding to them too much. But as someone who's aging, when I do sit with myself in quiet, I get bodily sensations. And you know what? I judge those because I'm like, I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to feel this like tweak in my thigh, in my hips. And so that too, like once you dig into mindfulness, there's a new layer of like, oh, I'm noticing these things now. I have new judgments that I, have to sit with and let them pass, or, be mindful and aware of them. So there's a lot to mindfulness. It is.
I think that's such a great point, Liz, because especially as women, and not just women our age. So Alyssa and I are both in our early 30s, but women in society as we age, there's so much judgment placed on us from society that when we do take a second to sit with ourselves, sometimes it's really hard to practice these mindfulness techniques because we don't want to sit with ourselves. We don't want to look at the aging wrinkles. We don't want to see that our hair is turning gray. We don't want to feel the thigh twitch or notice that our back hurts or that we've gained weight. These are things that are really hard for us. And then, you go into any type of medical situation and they're all used against you. And so that can create a lot of inner turmoil, especially when you're sitting down and trying to look inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And on top of that, social media, like I can be sitting with myself and then I feel that urge to look at my phone. And that is not just Emily and I, it is ingrained into society these days. And so that as well, avoiding that urge, we're urge surfing, we're just thinking about these things that we want to do, but we're not doing them. That can be mindfulness. And maybe you give in every now and then, or you like think a thought for a little bit longer, but just like being present with yourself and allowing yourself to be in that space is mindfulness. And so again, I know we talked about this last time, but like if you sit into mindfulness and you judge yourself that you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, you're not, and keep going. It might still feel like that for a little while, but you're doing it. And it will feel better and better.
Exactly. You're probably doing it and you don't even realize it. Anytime you take a moment to look inwardly, we talk about how to practice mindfulness. Something that I like to regularly do for myself is the feeling of the five senses, because I'm someone that suffers greatly from anxiety, and when I can't calm myself down, I have to think about why I am so upset. And this actually happened today. I was at the grocery store and I started to have a panic attack and I started to cry. And we were in line to check out. And I just looked at my fiance and I said, the keys, I have to remove myself from this space. And I went into the car and I had a good cry. But to calm myself down, I had to think about why I was crying. Why was I upset? So anyone listened to episode 2 of our podcast about the gender health gap, you know that I've been struggling with a lot of medical symptoms that have gone undiagnosed and where my doctors just hit dead ends and wouldn't help me and told me that it was pretty much on myself. I was recently diagnosed with autoimmune Hashimoto's, which has caused a number of things, including a great deal of weight gain, which again, as a woman in society, is a very hard thing to deal with. Hair loss, unbelievable pain that is indescribable, and we don't need to go into it. But one of the things that I do to help this disease is cut back on certain things that I'm eating. So no gluten, no dairy, very limited amounts of soy. And it's very, very hard in the United States to find things to eat. Don't include those. So you go through the produce section, you go through the meat section, you have your protein and veggie for the day. Rice is fine, that's gluten free. But I'm human. I like to have snacks. I like to have things to reach for when I'm feeling, a little bit of a hunger urge. And that's a little bit harder. I also don't like my food to be bland. I'm Italian. We were learned to spice and have flavor in our food. And so when you're looking to grab ingredients that typically you could use and now you can't, it's very overwhelming. So that's the thought I had to sit with in the car about why I was feeling that way. And then to calm myself down, I had to use a mindfulness technique that typically works for me when I have anxiety, which was my five senses. What could I see? What could I hear? What could I smell? What could I taste? What could I feel? And it brought me back, not the whole way. It's been a pretty tough day, but it did bring me back enough to not absolutely lose my shit, for lack of a better term. So, if you think you're doing it wrong, there's a million things around you where you probably practice these things and you're doing it right. There is no wrong way to look inside, for sure.
Wow. I always appreciate your personal instances. And you just mentioned a skill that we have on one of the four tenets of DBT, which I'm kind of in the weeds with right now as a DBT therapist. Always what's on my mind, but it's observe, describe, and participate, or ODP. And that's one of the main aspects of mindfulness, according to dialectical behavioral therapy. So observe is to just notice. Are you urge surfing? What can you notice with your senses? And I'd be really curious to know what you experienced in the car, because that is, a place where we probably all have been and can practice a mindfulness practice there. So I'd love to hear that. And then describe, put words on just the facts. So this is the non-judgment part. And then participate. How can I enter into this experience? How can I keep going? Do I just take myself out of the experience and move on? Whatever participate means to you in that moment. So that's just really wonderful that you mentioned that. And I'm sorry that you're going through that. Also, I think that it's just like an interesting segue for us to keep communication and keep learning. And it's, I know it's a struggle and going to be a tough ride for you. But I'm excited to see what we learn and like where you go with it.
Yeah.
So.
And hopefully, there's things that can help other people with this diagnosis, because it was very hard to come to. But relating back to what you just said in terms of what I experienced in the car, I got in the car and the tears actually started in the grocery store, and I could feel that I was getting overwhelmed because I started avoiding Troy. I didn't want him to look at me. And I started grabbing my hat. I had a hat on, and I could feel myself like grabbing my hat and fidgeting. And then the tears started, and I was like, okay, I need to leave. This is not a good space for me. I need to leave. So realizing that, a way to practice mindfulness is to remove yourself from what is not serving you. I couldn't be in the grocery store at that time. Does that mean I can never go back to the grocery store? No, that means today, not the best day for me to go. When I got to the car, I let myself have a minute to breathe and just let the tears out. And then when I started thinking about my five senses, what could I see? There's a Chick-fil-A right next to the Trader Joe's. So I could see that Chick-fil-A was closed because it's Monday. Damn you, Chick-fil-A. I could judgment. I didn't really care. I didn't want Chick-fil-A, but I know a lot of people like wake up on Sundays and they're like, God damn it. So I could see Chick-fil-A and that no one was there. I could smell Troy's car. He is a psychotic person, and somehow after a few years, his car still has new car smell because he never lets it get dirty. Somehow it's a camp vehicle, but it's never dirty. So I could smell the new car smell. It was raining outside, so I could hear the raindrops on the sunroof and on the top of the car. I could taste, as gross as it sounds, I had just drank a GI supplement, so my mouth still kind of tasted like it because it's not a very fond taste. I could still taste it in my spit, which is, you know, something to taste, just something to focus on. And then in terms of feel, I turned the air conditioning up really, really high, because when I get upset, I tend to overheat. So I could just feel the cold on my face. Um, and then I came down a little bit in terms of, you know, what comes next. I had to turn it around, you know, I had other shit to do that day. I couldn't sit in that the entire time. And that's just the kind of person I am all the time, where I'm like, hey, we have shit to do. You can't sit here in this. But today was one of those days. So it was just taking the moment for myself in the car and realizing that not every grocery experience is going to be horrible. You know, you are going to get the hang of eating these foods. One of your best friends has celiac disease. Shout out Sydney. She is every single day since my diagnosis been sending me tips and tricks, which I appreciate. And so it's not always going to be this way. It is going to get better, and you are going to see your symptoms go into remission. Right now, it's just overwhelming, and you have other shit to do today. So get it together and finish the day, you know? So that was that
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. You actually described observe, describe, participate like
Mm-hmm.
twice. So in the grocery store, you went through it and then you participated with that and then you did it again. And so that's just to say you can do ODP 160 times in one day. You can do it twice in 2 seconds if your brain's moving that quickly. But if that's what's working for you, if it's slowing your mind down even a little bit, then it's doing its job. And
Yeah.
Emily mentioned really cold. That's another like huge factor of mindfulness and just like stress, lowering stress. You know, water is nature, but water also comes out of our faucets and we drink it and it's there for us. And so we can use cold water to splash it on your face and just like for that moment think about I'm splashing water on my face. What does this feel like? Is the water dripping onto my neck now? Do I have to wipe my face off? I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's a little bit thinking about the future. And so it's like, yeah, you don't get it perfectly all the time. There's no one like testing you on mindfulness. And that's the beauty of it. Like you just do it and no
Yeah.
one's there to say that you did it wrong. Unless you're into like, you know, freaking out on them and they're like, whoa, hey, let's take a step back now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, if we stick in terms of like senses and feelings, something else that I do, not just when I have anxiety, but just when I need to recenter, is put on a tank top or a sports bra, or let's be honest, sometimes I'm just topless and I will lay on a cold floor. So hardwood, ceramic tile, my kitchen floor is vinyl, whatever works. If you want to get dirty, choose a garage floor. It's pretty gross. But it does, even if you're there for a second, that sensation causes you to pause. And that typically brings me right back into just recentering and regathering my thoughts and my emotions and being able to take a step forward rather than being stuck in whatever I feel like I'm stuck in. What do you do? Like, what are your mindfulness practices?
Well, just really quick, I just want to say that mindfulness supports our mental health in a bunch of ways. But one is enhanced self-compassion and hearing Emily tell that story about, you know, a really uncomfortable situation, a literal panic attack. By the end of it, she was telling herself and sharing with us that like every day won't be bad at the grocery store. You will get through this. It's going to get better. That is enhanced self-compassion, which just warms my heart because that's a little bit of a harder one to find sometimes, really. And so just being present with those feelings and thoughts can just lead to like, oh yeah, this does suck. And I know that it's not going to last forever. So what can I tell myself to believe it? Because, you know, unless we're in a really big fight or flight kind of vibe, you know, it's gonna get better and you'll think it will at some point soon. But yeah, my little high horse. What do I do?
What do you do?
Well, So I live close to the gym, which is lovely. And actually, Emily taught me about this comedian. I can't even remember her name, but she said this joke, and maybe I said this last week, but just like how it's impossible to walk down the street and not have your headphones in when you're walking. So just like when I'm walking, even if I'm in a building, I really try to just be present with that where I'm going. Can I make eye contact and smile at people? Can I just like count my steps or look at my feet or, admire my great fashion sense? So just like walking without other distractions, just really trying to be in the present moment as much as I can without that judgment. That's something I do. And then like when I go to my yoga class, which I've been really trying to get to, I will walk there and I will admire the sounds around. And then once I get to yoga, I try to get a little early. I try to lay on the floor and just like sit there quietly. There's sounds from the climbing gym where, people are yelling and the music's over there. And then I'm in this like quieter room, but I can still hear the music out there. And so just being in a space where I'm seeking peace and it's not like the most peaceful place can be a good practice too. And just like literally sitting and breathing. There's a lot more to it than you think when you are in that moment. But when you say it out loud, it's like, I walk somewhere and then I lay down and it's over. So,
And
yeah.
then I feel better. And then
Yeah.
I love that.
You did something for yourself, even if it was just like I laid down and like just, thought about myself. I took this time for myself. Like I feel a tiny bit better. Even if my situation's not great, like I'm taking this time for me to think about that or like think about what I need to focus on what works. Like how can I be effective in my feelings and my actions? Yeah.
Do you listen to anything, listen to music or anything like that when you ski, climb, kayak, anything like that? A lot of people do, so zero judgment. I'm just curious.
Oh yeah. I have like playlists for every life event. I made a playlist for doing yoga at Emily's bachelorette party this year. So I have playlists here. Yeah, so I like to do that. And then I really just love to like if I get a really bad night's sleep, I know I need to do more things for myself that day because I will be a grumpy person. So I'll get up and immediately like go downstairs, chug water, move my body around, like do my silly dance. Because I know if I don't, I am not going to like how that day goes. So music is a huge part of that for me.
Yeah.
There's different kinds.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because I feel like I'm the opposite. So it's a great example of why mindfulness can be conducive to who you are as a person. And there is no way to do it wrong because mindfulness can be putting on that playlist that makes you feel good or that recenters you. Or you could be like me where when I'm skiing or kayaking or doing or hiking or anything like that, I just like to listen to what's around me, partially for safety, but also because it allows me to be there with myself. If we were going back to episode 3 where we talked about nature therapy, you would hear me talk about the experiences that I had the first time I went to Colorado to visit Alyssa. And part of the reason I had those experiences is because of the mindfulness practices that we were doing. We would just sit on rocks, no music, no, distractions, no cell phone service, and we just sit. Or the last time I was in Colorado, we went camping. And we set up a hammock and we set up our tent, and you guys saw the video of raining ice, or a more appropriate term for it would be hailstorm. But I wasn't that literate when I was speaking then because I was in awe. But we just sat there and listened to it hit the tent. And there was a moment when we were camping where Alyssa went and she was playing in the stream and playing in the water, and I was sitting on the shoreline, and we just didn't speak for a good hour, hour and a half, and we just took time to ourselves. And that is when I feel I learn the most about myself and when I really recenter. So I think there's a lot to be said for the different ways to practice, because you can have playlists when you hike, you can have playlists when you ski, when you kayak, when you do anything that you love, you can do that. And it might be something that grounds you and brings you back to center. Or you could be someone that would rather have the silence and just sounds of what's going on around you to recenter you as well.
And maybe as you listen to this, you hear some that feel really good, some that feel like you are already really good at them. And maybe the challenge is that you try some that you haven't tried yet. We can only just keep increasing our toolbox, adding more tools to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like to talk about, how mindfulness shows support specifically to mental health, especially because Alyssa is so well versed and licensed in that area. And because as someone who struggles with her mental health, especially as there's stress is a huge thing that happens to us mentally, but stress affects our bodies, and stress can be induced by anxiety and depression, and then it physically ends up affecting us. Right? And earlier in the episode, we've talked a lot about, emotion regulation, and that doesn't mean not feeling your emotions. You should feel everything you want to feel. Your feelings are valid, but how to actually take them and use them in a way that serves you, as opposed to just sitting them and not being able to move forward as a person, and so on and so forth. Alyssa talked about, enhanced self-compassion, things like that. And I just think taking the time to recognize that mindfulness is a technique that if you are struggling with your mental health, this is something that can help you. Ways to recenter, right? So when you're dealing with your patients lists, what mindfulness techniques do you most commonly see? Or are there people to you say, I did this, and you're like, wow, I learned something new today. I never even thought about doing that. Like, are there things that stand out to you?
Yeah. So the five senses is definitely a huge one. Touching on our senses is great. And, sometimes sitting in silence will not work for someone for a while. And that might not be the recommendation at first. Like, if sitting quietly sounds like triggering to you, maybe it's because like you're not in the headspace yet to be able to, not be thinking about that thing that's really upsetting. So some practices do not work for others, and maybe they never will. And again, that's kind of just like life. We're all different humans. There's like billions of us. So it'd be so wild if we all used the same mindfulness practice and they all worked. But with that, I think one that people are really shocked that I mention is the eating mindfully thing. And maybe, that could be difficult, Emily, right now for you because of what's going on with you. But to literally just sit down and slowly eat, especially if you have siblings and you've been trained to eat as fast as humanly possible and go wash the dishes, maybe just like sitting slowly and eating, not eating in front of a TV. This is something that I absolutely do. I eat in front of the TV almost every night, but whenever we have guests over or, we just decide like we should not watch TV tonight and sit and eat and talk. I think those things are helpful and also surprisingly on this mindfulness list that we're talking about.
Yeah. Love
Yeah.
being mindful. Alyssa is the queen of eating. Alyssa's the queen of so many things. I admire her for so many things.
Too.
I just admire like her perspective on life. She is able to do what, as we grow, a lot of us are not able to apply. She has such a youthful, almost childlike approach to joy. And she finds joy in just the smallest things. And I think eating mindfully is such a good example of that, because I have been sitting across the table from Melissa when her mom has literally, all she did was cook an artichoke and put salt on it. And I've never seen someone take so long to eat an artichoke. And the moment it cracked me up, but it's really such an expression of joy to have that home cooked meal, to be in her mother's house, to enjoy the flavor of what she's eating, the texture of what she's eating, the feeling that she gets when she eats it. And it's not something that we think about. Have you ever just sat down and like, oh my God, like this chocolate cake is so damn good, but you don't really like take the time. You're just like, damn, this chocolate cake is good, and you move on. What does it feel like to actually sit with that and sit with the bite in your mouth and appreciate and show gratitude for what it's for? It doesn't have to be chocolate cake. It could be an artichoke. It could be whatever you want. But I think that's a practice that a lot of the time these things feel silly, or they feel small, or they feel like they won't be impactful, but they are. They really are. And it's part of why when and if you ever get the chance to connect with Alyssa in person, you'll see she radiates joy all the time, because she, even though she's going through things in life, she always takes time to appreciate little things like that and be mindful and show gratitude and practice those things, even for the things in life. And I love that about her.
Oh, yeah, that made me think of two things. And the first thing is that once I suggested eating mindfully to someone and they were like, I only eat TV dinners. Why would I do that? Like, totally not going to use that practice. And that's fine. But I just encourage you to like think deeper into like, maybe why won't that work for me? Is it because of what I'm eating, or like, is it because of something deeper than that? And that's just with everything. It's not just the eating part. And then, I guess just to get a little deep here for a moment, like, I think that every therapist like probably became one because they needed one so badly as a child, or like at some point in their lives. And like, I really can't remember much about like before my 19th year of life. And I know Emily knows where I'm going with this. And thank God I had Em to like remind me of times before, and just remind me of like the good that there was in that part of my life. But when I was 19, my dad passed away and I was not close with him. And I had so much regret and self-hatred for myself because I didn't like try to connect with him more, that if I didn't work past those things, like I don't think I would have made it. I would have not been the same person. I just really didn't have any of the skills that I have now. And I really think it was partially forced on me and partially like, hey, if you don't do this, like, what's going to become of you? So that gratitude practice, I think, really comes in strong on my, hierarchy of what do I do in my personal mindfulness. What are the positive things going on in your life? And maybe it's just like, this houseplant looks really green today. Like really just like talking about like, oh my God, that salt made that part of that soup just pop. Just things like that. And so, yeah, that I think is like where the really juicy bits of life are, is like the mindfulness and like finding that like, oh, this works and it feels good. I love this.
Let's do it right now. Let's both do it. Give me 3 things that you have gratitude for today. Not generalized, not this week, not this month, today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyday general life and today, because I'm looking at you. Oh my God, Emily as like one of my personal like achievements in life, that I have a friend like this. What else today? I have these socks on that my partner's mom bought for me, and it's of a dog pushing a wheelbarrow of flowers to a pot that I assume he's going to put the flowers in. That makes me happy, and the amount of people that compliment my socks also makes me happy, and it makes me feel good too. So that, and like even just like where I'm at right now, Emily's hat that she has on is really cool. It looks cool. It has a memory associated with like her own life, and like we had a good conversation around it before this, and so I'm super grateful that like she has stuff that brings her joy. I think all that counts. What about you, Em?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's funny you say that because the reason I decided to wear this hat today is because my mom, my mom doesn't live close to me. She lives an hour away, and I wanted to feel my mom today because I was having a hard day. So I put this hat on. But anyways, my three things I think I would say solely around today. My dad is not an overly emotional man. He doesn't get involved in the nitty gritty. And today, with my recent diagnosis, I did tell my dad about it. And today he called me, and it felt really good to talk to him. It's not very often that I'm exceedingly vulnerable with him because he's not an exceedingly vulnerable person. But I cried on the phone to my dad, and he made me laugh, and he made me feel better. And I was really grateful. I'm gonna cry. Oh my God. Sorry to everyone listening to me cry. I
Shout
was
out
really
Baldy.
shout out to my dad. I was really grateful to talk to him today. And just remember that just because people are different doesn't mean that they're not there for you, because they are, and they love you. So it was great for that. I was super grateful today on our car ride home from the grocery store. Sometimes I'm really hard to talk to. I don't, when I'm in my head like that, or I'm angry, or I'm sad, there's not a lot of talking to me. So Troy tends to, let me calm down first. But he just reached over and touched my leg to let me know that he was there. And that felt really good.
No, I'm
And
here
then
too.
don't cry. Troy's the best. And then I will say, to bring us up a little bit, Chubb's got a new toy, and he is just obsessed with it. And every time I walk in the house, and today I walked in the house, covered in tears, and he picked up his new toy and he brought it to me, and he was wagging his tail and his ears were back, and he was like, "Oh, mommy, hi." And, he was so happy. So just feeling the joy from my dog when I walked in the house after that experience today. So I was grateful.
Yeah. And Chubbs was probably really grateful for like getting to lick the salty tears and his new toy.
He was for sure. So I very much appreciated that today. But yeah, so just remember, everybody, that there's no wrong way to practice mindfulness. Whatever you can do to allow yourself to stop your judgment of yourself and the things that are going on around you, to allow yourself to drop your ego a little bit and, feel your feelings, but also find ways to move forward in life and show that gratitude, and, show that life does get better. And just because today is a day doesn't mean that, tomorrow it will be. And I hope that you found a lot of connection in our episode today, because I think Alyssa and I both shared really vulnerable things, which we haven't done that deep yet. We've gotten mad, we've gotten happy, but we haven't gotten sad. So today we got a little bit sad with you. And we thank you so much for joining us on this journey today.
Yeah, we're grateful for you all. We're grateful for Brandon being mindful of all the effort that he, took to support us. Yeah, just so grateful and sad and happy and mad all at the same time still. And it's probably just going to be that way. So we just can continue to observe those things, describe them, share with others, participate in life, and be present with the ones you love and with yourself. So thank you so much, and have a lovely week.